Imagine, for a second, you're at a completely normal, everyday neighborhood barbecue.
Right, just a casual weekend thing.
Exactly. People are laughing, they're flipping burgers, checking their phones, arguing about sports, the sun is shining. But, and this is the kicker, you are the only person standing in that backyard who knows, with absolute terrifying certainty, that the food has been laced with a lethal poison.
Oh, wow. Okay, that escalates quickly.
Right, so in that exact moment, what do? I mean, do you casually walk up to your neighbor and politely suggest they, maybe try the salad instead?
Definitely not.
Do you worry about ruining the vibe of the party? No. You flip the table, you scream at the top of your lungs, you knock the plates right out of people's hands because, well, from your perspective, being polite is the equivalent of letting them die.
Yeah, the whole social contract of a polite neighborhood gathering just completely disintegrates the second you introduce those kinds of absolute life or death stakes. You become a disruptive force out of sheer necessity.
Yes, exactly. And that visceral, screaming urgency, that willingness to entirely ruin the party to save a life, is the exact emotional and psychological starting point for our deep dive today.
It really is.
Welcome, everyone. If you're listening to this, you're probably curious about how different people view the world around us. Today, we are taking an objective, analytical look at a highly charged religious document.
It's an intense one.
It is. It's a text titled The Watchman's Cry, Sounding the Alarm in the Last Days. Our goal is to simply look at the mechanics, the rhetoric, and the deeply held worldview that this text presents and just understand how it mobilizes its readers.
Which is frankly an incredibly revealing exercise for anyone trying to understand modern cultural dynamics.
Right.
I mean, when you read this text, you are stepping into a theological framework that operates on a ticking clock.
A very loud ticking clock.
Exactly. The overarching premise of this document is a fierce, unyielding pushback against what the author sees as a modern, soft version of Christianity.
Right, the soft gospel.
Yeah. It is a demand for urgent end-times evangelism. It actively pushes aside everything else, comfort, social standing, reputation, in favor of sounding an ultimate deafening alarm.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the text doesn't exactly warm you up to this intense premise.
Not at all.
No, it comes out swinging right in the first few lines by establishing this massive conflict. But the conflict isn't just between, believers and non-believers. The author specifically targets what they describe as mockers, who tell believers to cease this obsession with the end-time messages and just preach the gospel only.
Right, it's aimed inward.
Yeah, the text is actually taking aim at a specific type of religious culture.
And notice the precise language the author uses to describe that opposing culture. The text critiques an approach built on, quote, soft words, warm embraces, and gentle reminders that Jesus loves all.
Warm embrace.
Right. Now, the text isn't arguing that divine love doesn't exist. Rather, it's performing a rhetorical boundary setting. In the author's view, while mainstream churches are busy giving out warm embraces and gentle reminders, the rest of the world is, as the text explicitly states, hurrying blindly toward hellfire's abyss.
Wow.
Yeah. The author views the mainstream, comfortable approach to faith as a lethal distraction from the actual crisis.
I'm trying to wrap my head around how the author views that soft approach. It reminds me of a severe medical scenario.
Okay, how so?
Like, imagine a doctor refusing to tell a patient they have a terminal, fast-moving illness because, well, the patient's having a really good day, and the doctor only wants to deliver good news and offer a warm hug.
Oh, wow.
If the physician knows the disease is going to kill the patient in a week, just giving them a hug and saying everything is fine isn't just unhelpful. I mean, it is medical malpractice.
What's fascinating here is how that medical analogy perfectly captures the sociological grievance the author has with modern religious institutions.
Right.
The text frames the simple Jesus loves you message, not as a theological falsehood, but is dangerously, fatally incomplete if it entirely ignores the impending cliff.
The cliff, yeah.
The author explicitly states that a major percentage of the world is walking blindly toward this cliff that leads to eternal destruction. And crucially, the text notes that most of these souls are either totally unaware or adamantly do not care about what lies beneath their feet.
They just don't care.
Exactly. So for a believer to sit idly by and whisper softly while those souls plunge into eternal darkness, that is viewed as a supreme moral failure.
It completely flips the definition of compassion. The text argues that true love, what they call Jesus Christ love, isn't about making someone feel validated or comfortable in their current state.
No, it's the opposite.
It is about yanking them back from the edge of the abyss, regardless of whether they want to be yanked or not. And this is what genuinely surprised me as we dug into these sources. It's how the text enforces this.
Yeah, it gets intense.
It doesn't just offer this as like a good suggestion for living a faithful life. It shifts into a terrifying personal liability for the reader.
It really does. The document moves from a broad critique of modern church culture to a very pointed, individualized mandate. To enforce this, the author anchors the entire argument in a central ancient biblical metaphor from the book of Ezekiel.
Ezekiel 33.6, right?
This is the metaphor of the watchman.
The watchman on the wall. The text quotes the scripture directly, and the language is just staggering. God tells the prophet that if the watchman sees the sword coming, but doesn't blow the trumpet to warn the people, and someone is taken away in their iniquity,
their blood will be required at the watchman's hand.
Their blood on the watchman's hands. That's a massive burden.
It's terrifying. And to understand the psychological weight of this, we have to look at the historical context of that metaphor. In ancient walled cities in the 6th century BCE, the watchman was the single person stationed on the highest parapet of the city wall during the darkest hours of the night.
Just staring out into the dark.
Exactly. Their solitary job was to stare out at the horizon, looking for the dust of invading armies. If that watchman fell asleep, or if they saw the enemy but hesitated to blow the ram's horn because, say, they were afraid of causing a false panic.
Or just didn't want to wake people up.
Right. If they hesitated, the ensuing slaughter of the city was entirely their fault.
Wow.
The text takes this brutal, ancient wartime reality and drops it squarely onto the shoulders of the modern, everyday believer. It quotes Mark 13 and 1 Thessalonians 5, commanding followers to be watchful, sober, and awake, not slumbering as the world slumbers.
I have to push back on how this plays out in reality, though. I mean, for you and me, just living our lives.
Sure.
If I apply this ancient wartime metaphor to my modern life and I start screaming at my coworkers in the break room that they are headed for an abyss, basic human psychology, specifically psychological reactance, means they're going to immediately tune me out.
Oh, absolutely.
They will put their headphones in and avoid me. So, does the author address the fact that this highly aggressive tactic might actually push people further away? Or is the text less concerned with the effectiveness of the warning and more concerned with simply issuing it?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you've just hit on the most critical mechanism of this document. The text is not a public relations manual.
Clearly not.
It is not overly concerned with marketability or gentle persuasion. It is about obedience and the shedding of personal liability.
Shedding liability.
Yes.
Yeah.
The text even drives this home by quoting Proverbs 24, which asks a haunting question. If you fail to deliver those who are drawn to death, and you say, "See, we knew it not," doesn't God who ponders the heart know the truth?
So you can't play dumb.
Exactly. The document is telling the reader that you cannot feign ignorance. God sees that you stayed quiet to save your own social standing. Therefore, delivering the warning, however aggressively, clears the believer's conscience. It transfers liability. You blew the trumpet, whatever happens next is on them.
Wait, so this text is arguing that for believers, simply being a good person is woefully insufficient.
Essentially, yes.
You can't just quietly live a moral life and hope people notice your good example. Staying quiet is actively framed as an act of complicity in someone else's destruction. The text says you are commanded to cry aloud and spare not, to lift up your voice like a trumpet.
Right.
It forces the believer to become a mobilized guard on the wall.
And that introduces a massive secondary problem for the reader. I mean, if you actually internalize this massive burden and you start living your life with this level of screaming urgency, the immediate real-world result is that society is going to reject you.
Oh, 100%.
Your friends will distance themselves, your family will stop inviting you to things. The text structurally has to provide a defense mechanism against that inevitable societal rejection, or the believer will just collapse under the social pressure.
And the author totally anticipates that rejection. The text openly admits that the world laughs and mocks this urgency. It says society will label this behavior as obsessive, intense, overzealous.
They know it's coming.
Yeah, the author knows the reader is going to be called a fanatic.
So how does the text insulate the reader from that very real pain of social alienation? It reaches back into biblical history to construct a flawless rhetorical shield. It invokes the story of Noah.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the way the text uses Noah is a brilliant piece of psychological armor. The document points out that Noah preached about the coming flood and God's wrath for 120 years.
A very long time to be mocked.
Right. And for a century, the world mocked him. The text claims the world told Noah, "You are too focused on judgment. Speak no more of this coming destruction."
Which creates a direct, unbroken parallel between the mocking Noah faced and the mocking the modern reader will face from the proponents of the soft gospel.
If you're standing on a highway screaming that the bridge is out ahead, drivers whizzing by might roll down their windows and call you a maniac. Normally, if everyone calls you a maniac, you might start to second-guess yourself. You might think, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm the crazy one. But the author uses Noah to flip that logic entirely.
Right.
In this worldview, being called a maniac isn't a sign that you have lost touch with reality. It is historical proof that you are absolutely right, because that is exactly how the doomed world treated Noah.
Sociologists refer to this as a closed epistemological loop.
A closed loop.
Yes, it is a psychological trick that makes the ideology completely unfalsifiable. It acts as rhetorical inoculation for the believer. Think about how powerful that is.
It's practically bulletproof.
Exactly. If people listen to you, you are saving souls, which validates your mission. But if people mock you, reject you, and call you obsessive, you are simply walking in the shoes of Noah, which also validates your mission. There is no external feedback that can prove the believer wrong.
Their alienation from modern society becomes a feature of their faith, not a bug.
Precisely. And the text lands a chilling conclusion to this metaphor, quoting Matthew 24. It reminds the reader that when the rain finally fell and God completely shut the door to the ark, it was too late for the mockers. They were swept away.
The imagery of that door shutting is so final. The text explicitly warns that God's door of mercy is closing right now in our present day, just like the heavy wooden door of the ark closed back then.
It's all about that impending deadline.
And establishing that closed loop, that immunity to criticism, allows the document to move into its final, most aggressive phase. The text pivots from defending its theology to issuing direct, physical directives to the reader about what must be done in these last days.
We see a complete shift in the vocabulary here. The language moves from theological justification to the active rhetoric of rescue. The verbs become incredibly physical and intrusive.
Yeah, very hands-on.
The text does not instruct the reader to invite lost souls to church. It commands them to snatch lost souls. It heavily relies on Jude 1.23, telling believers to pull them out of the fire, quote, hating even the garment spotted by the flesh.
Snatching, pulling. It is almost violent language, but it's framed entirely within the context of an emergency rescue.
Exactly.
If a house is burning to the ground and someone is trapped inside, you don't stand on the lawn and politely hand them a brochure about fire safety. You kick the door down, you grab them by the collar, and you drag them out into the street.
You do whatever it takes.
The text literally commands the church to run with full speed and shout with every might, "Stop! Turn back! The end is near!"
It pairs that physical directive with the invocation of Isaiah 58.1 to cement this loud, disruptive posture. Cry aloud, spare not, lift up your voice like a trumpet.
So no quiet faith.
It is a total rejection of the modern Western idea of a quiet, private, personal faith. In the worldview of this text, faith is meant to be loud, it is meant to be disruptive, and it is meant to be entirely impossible for the surrounding culture to ignore, because according to the author, the deadlines are absolute and non-negotiable.
The deadlines presented are incredibly grim. The document cites Hebrews 9.27. It is appointed to men to die once, after death is judgment. It completely removes any concept of a second chance or post-death realization.
Time is up.
Yeah. And it pairs that finality with Philippians 2, the idea that eventually every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord. The stark warning here is that mankind must choose to bow right now in faith, or they will be forced to bow later in absolute regret and terror. There is zero middle ground left for the reader to stand on.
This raises an important question about how this level of apocalyptic urgency alters a person's perception of everyday reality.
Right, so what does this all mean for how the author views the daily headlines?
Well, the text explicitly claims that God's Bible prophecy is unfolding before our very eyes with each day's headlines. When you adopt this framework, you are no longer just consuming the news. A report about a geopolitical conflict, a shifting economic policy, or a natural disaster is not just an event, it is a prophetic time clock ticking down.
That sounds exhausting.
It creates a perpetual state of hypervigilance. Every headline confirms that the apocalypse is one step closer, which mathematically means the window to snatch souls from the fire is closing by the second.
Ticking clock.
That is why the text pleads with the reader to abandon all pride, all ego, and crucially, all fear of man. You cannot afford to care about social anxiety or what your neighbors think of your tone if you genuinely believe their eternal fate is sealed without your immediate intervention.
The author does not let the reader keep this abstract either. The text explicitly says, friends, family, or neighbors may be walking toward hellfire's eternity of torment.
Right at your dinner table.
Exactly. It brings the apocalypse right to your front door, right to your Thanksgiving dinner. It demands you look at the people closest to you and view them as casualties waiting to happen.
And this requires us to recognize a profound juxtaposition at the core of this entire worldview. To someone outside this belief system, a person standing on a corner or sitting in a break room screaming about impending hellfire looks like hostility.
It looks crazy.
It looks like hatred, intolerance, or severe mental distress. But the author explicitly frames this aggressive, unyielding, disruptive warning as the ultimate, truest form of love. In their mind, to let someone walk over the cliff in polite silence would be the ultimate act of hatred.
If you are listening to this deep dive, that is the crucial takeaway I want you to hold on to. We have spent this time objectively analyzing a text that views the entire world through a lens of extreme, ticking clock urgency.
It's a very intense lens.
Whether you find this theology deeply familiar or entirely alien and uncomfortable, understanding the mechanics of how it works is vital. This is not just a fringe internet document. It represents the structural, deeply held worldview of a massive percentage of the global population.
Absolutely.
When you understand the crushing psychological weight of the Watchman metaphor, the terrifying belief that the blood of the unwarned is literally on your hands, you begin to comprehend the intense motivations behind these movements. When that coworker or family member brings this up, you now know that for them, it isn't just about winning a theological debate. They believe they are executing a literal rescue mission from a burning building.
It completely reframes how we observe these cultural interactions. It replaces our assumption of malice with an understanding of their perceived burden.
And as we wrap up our analysis of the Watchman's Cry, I want to leave you with something entirely different to ponder, something that extends beyond the immediate text.
Okay, what is it?
If millions of people are operating under this intense, closed-loop worldview, genuinely believing that the door of mercy is closing and the world is in its final terminal days, how does that impact our broader society?
That's a big question.
Specifically, if you firmly believe the world is ending tomorrow, you are never going to bother planting an oak tree today. If a significant portion of our global population views reality through a ticking clock, apocalyptic lens, how does that impact our collective ability to plan for the future?
Oh, wow.
Right. How do we rally support for 100-year problems like multi-generational infrastructure or long-term environmental conservation when a massive group of people believes we won't even be here a decade from now?
It suggests that apocalyptic theology doesn't just dictate how people treat their neighbors' souls. It fundamentally dictates how they invest or refuse to invest in the future of the physical world itself. And honestly, if someone genuinely truly believed with every fiber of their being that the people sitting next to them on the bus were walking toward an eternal fire, wouldn't it actually be an act of profound cruelty for them to stay silent?
A massive societal puzzle to leave you with today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we will catch you on the next one.